guys, my name is Joshua Ansley, or at least the name that was given to me by my parents 38 years ago. And welcome back to another episode of I Am I. So, today I want to talk about, as you can see, I'm going on a little trip, a little excursion for about 3 weeks. Los Angeles, Seattle, and then St. John. You know, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to live at their mother's in order to make it happen, right? So, speaking of living at my mother's, you know, I talked last week about going to hell. Wait, that sounds really bad. That's not what I mean. I'm going to rewind this. Okay. Hi, my name is Joshua Ansley, or so my parents gave me that name. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of I Am I. My name is Joshua Ansley, or the name that was given to me by my parents 38 years ago. I prefer Aurora, but nobody really knows that. So, I want to talk today about conditioning a little bit, and reconditioning, right? So, there's a few things that I want to discuss, and it's basically understanding that, first of all, whatever path we're taking, if we're on this path, and we are all on this path in one way or another, to some degree. But when we really break open into this path, it's really understanding that there are so many different ways to do it. There is no one way. And it's very difficult because you'll find people that have found a way, and oftentimes they'll think that their way may be either the only way or the best way. Very rarely do we find people that understand that they have found a way and it happens to be their way, and maybe they can help you if your way happens to coincide with their way. So just remember that on your journey, is like part of it is learning to trust yourself so that you can know which path and which part of the path you need to take. It's learning to trust yourself so you can learn not to trust yourself and give yourself over so that you can then learn to trust yourself. Huh? That's actually kind of how it happens, right? So, anyway, that being said, I want to talk about some conditioning. And basically, there are several brain wavelengths that we have, right, and that we live in. And I mentioned last week, or a couple weeks ago, but you probably didn't hear it because there was tons of water flow and you couldn't hear a damn thing I was saying. And that was the point. It's esoteric knowledge that can't be spread yet. You weren't ready to hear it. But one of the things was, this is a joke. So one of the things was that our brain wavelength, as we meditate, it approaches 7.83 hertz, which is the Schumann resonance. And that is the wavelength, the average wavelength of the Earth. So it's pretty incredible how we are really just microcosms of this Earth, right? So these different wavelengths, when we are about 0 to 6 years old, we're in theta. Theta wavelength is basically really subconscious, really access to the subconscious, very close. And it is basically, we are really susceptible and receptive, right? So that's why it's so easy, like, for children to learn new things and much more difficult to learn things as you get older, right? And so from 0 to 6, these are like the really formative years of our lives. And we get a lot of conditioning at that time. And now, I want to be very clear, as I'm always trying to be, about blame and responsibility and the difference between the two, because this is not about blame. And I'll get into it, explaining a little bit why right here. Right now, it's about to happen. So it's all about perspective, right? So it is not about blaming, it's about taking responsibility, because whatever happened, happened. Whatever was. What is. And that's just the way it is, right? It is what it is. And now it's our responsibility, regardless of who was to blame for it, right? And it's not just semantics. It's a very powerful perspective. And it's understanding, because even in the conditioning that has happened when we were children, it may be things that it's not so much what is taught, but what is learned. And what is learned from the mind of a child, right? So we're trying to figure these things out. And that's how we develop survival mechanisms. And if we grew up in dysfunction, which 99.99% of us did to some degree or another, right? Because it really doesn't even matter, even if we're in a good functioning household, it's how our child brain receives that information and interprets it and then develops a mode of living, right? So it's understanding that the way we are learning it and I just lost completely what the hell I was talking about, and all I see is some pink flowers. Then I'm like, oh, pretty pink flowers. Where the hell was I? Okay, Josh, bring it back. So, for instance, if my mother, I was a single parent. My dad, they separated when I was like 1, and my mother had to work very hard to support the household. And that means we had to chip in a lot of places too. And what I learned from that, not what was taught, was not so much necessarily that a good hard work ethic and you'll get what you want. It's that life, and in order to get what you want, it's a challenge and a struggle. And really, it's about getting to the point where you wouldn't have to work so hard. Now that was just my mother working her ass off and not expecting the life that she was handed. Like, she didn't have a guidebook, or a handbook how to raise 2 kids on her own. It's amazing what she did. She was a fucking powerhouse. But the young boy that was now dealing with abandonment issues and all this kind of stuff, and self-worth as a result of that, and seeing my mother unhappy because she was struggling so much to work, and unhappy that the divorce was happening, and that blah 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 blah, that I couldn't now make her happy, right? And that I couldn't make her happy as hard as she was struggling. I couldn't make her happy. And so now that conditioning was not something that my mother taught me. That was just something that I learned. Right? So it's very important to understand, again, not blame but responsibility, as now growing into a man and growing into who I want to be, and making the changes necessary in my conditioning. And that's where it's very difficult, because moving through these spaces inside of ourselves, like I talked about last week, going to hell, and you got to go to hell before you get to heaven. Some people don't believe that, and that's okay. That's why I say there's other people that do. I did an amazing sound bowl meditation with this amazing fellow traveler of mine, Denise, and if you want any reference on that, it's an incredible healing, and that, without necessarily having to dig deep into your psyche, really resonates and vibrates and releases a lot of stuff from the body and aligns a lot of stuff in the chakra system and all this great stuff without having to dig into who you are and dig into your own personal hell. I use all these different things, because I want to be training my mind as well, So, and reconditioning, so that when I'm finding, as I step into life now, and I'm thinking most people would be like, leave that shit behind you, who cares, get over it, let that shit go, right? And of course, that is all absolutely true. But we have to, for me, I have to understand a little bit why it even happened, It's like I could sit there and I could look at my habits and patterns and say, okay, this is pride, this is ego, this is selfishness, and then I can pray to God to have him remove these defects of character. But for me, it's actually understanding a little bit deeper why these defects of character. For some people, they don't need to understand why. For me, I'm like, well, where do these defects of character, as we call them, which are really survival mechanisms? There are ways that I learned how to survive in this world. So in some ways, it's like, hey, man, good job, little boy, for learning how to survive in this difficult situation, and that's the way you developed. But instead of being like, well, so you're a piece of shit for that, it's really understanding, okay, good job for that. Now let's maybe figure out a better way and understand that there is possibly a different and maybe more productive way to live, a more productive way to operate, a more productive way to think. And that is what I'm stepping into in my life. So it's understanding that as we meditate and do this work and coincide with clearing out this mind and clearing out all this old crap and digging down into it and releasing it all out, is also taking care of ourselves and understanding that we are beautiful, beautiful, divine expressions of love as we grow from being children of God into adults of God, right? And as that happens, there is a true transformation that we start to step into empowerment in our lives and let go of these old belief systems. And in my understanding, it really does require going back and looking in and understanding why those modes of thinking are there in the first place. And for me, that requires a lot of meditation and stuff as well. Like I was saying about changing our brain wavelengths and getting into these spaces of balance and ease, right? So that we can step into the more challenging aspects of our lives, so that we can step into places to grow and recognize that our failures, our successes do not define us. Our honor or dishonor does not define us. None of anything that we've ever done does not define us. Record contracts or making films or, writing books. I haven't written books, I've written some screenplays and stuff, but I'm saying whatever it is that you've done, even if they're great, huge successes, we can say, great, fantastic that you've done that. It's not about dismissing that, but it's understanding that if we're defined by our successes, then we'll also have to be defined by our failures. And it's not that. All that is nonsense of the ego and the mind, and maybe things that we've developed, and even our success monetarily in this world can be our conditioning as a child to try to prove in some way that we are worthy. And I'll tell you right now that you are absolutely worthy. Everything that you do is a beautiful expression of love on this planet. And I love you. So, that's all I got to say for today. And Makesha the Kin, I am you, you are me. Namaste. What? Too much? Oh!